So my piece is a jar version of a triptych, and it was largely inspired by Paul Morgan and Francis Bacon, where he looks at fragility of humans and distorted paintings of unknown objects or animals. I wanted to evoke a sort of feeling of the living in the dead, the physical world, and also the world beyond the world we're living in that we don't actually understand anything about. The title is Dead End, with a knot in the middle with brackets. The piece on the lowest plinth describes shows the afterlife. I used air drying clay predominantly and some blue tack so it sticks on. It's a crow head ripped apart with its insides coming out with blood in it, and from inside of its organs there's a tree branch coming out of it. Contrast between life and death. It signifies the afterlife, how we know nothing about what the afterlife essentially is because we just die and we don't know what happens. So it shows the limitless possibilities of the afterlife. The reason why I used a crow is because of its association with witches, witchcraft, and also because of the so-called evil behaviours that was recorded, such as performing rituals for the dead or even mating with a dead crow, which does not serve any particular purpose in the natural world. And the tree branch that comes out from the crow shows the possibilities in life. How the tree signifies life, how life could come out of death, because we just simply don't know what happens after death. The amount of possibilities it's just limited by imaginations, really. Hundreds of thousands of religions across the world depicting heaven, hell, judgment day, or Buddhism, where you become different animals or you get reincarnated, rebirth, with a soul going to a different higher level life. In the end, we don't know anything of it, and because we don't know anything of it, it could be the end, but it doesn't have to be the end, and that's where I got the title Dead Not End from. There's rocks, small rocks. It's actually air drying clay surrounding the crow and the tree, almost like a ritual or scene of a movie. This is probably the most ambitious and the most important one amongst the three in this triptych. And the reason I say this is because the other two jars actually revolve around this jar. It's a 12-sided jar, and inside it there's chicken bones on the bottom with sort of milky water that I initially didn't intend to do, but it just happened as time went on. On top of it is a thin layer of chili oil. From the bottom of the lid hangs a rubber ball, which is actually a ball from sports called fives. I painted it blue. It hangs on a thread with a needle in it from the bottom of the jar. And it's the only jar that has a lid on it amongst the three. So this jar attempts to express physical life and death. The sphere represents life, like planets, the earth, the universe, and the earth especially flourishes with life. It hangs just on top of the surface of the chili oil, which represents suffering, pain, the sort of things you experience when you die. That thin layer of chili oil, when you think of chili, it's not actually a kind of taste, it's just a pain in the mouth. It's a sensation of burning on the bottom where the chicken bones are submerged in the milky water. That's death. That's where everything supposedly ends in the physical world. The margin between the life and the death in the physical world is minimal. There's really not much that separates us from death. We are kept alive by complex systems in our body, and if one of them fails, I'm dead. It's evident that it's easier to kill someone than keeping someone alive. It explores the way that we're hanging on a thread. Constantly we are living, and things that separate us from death is minimal, and we're really fragile beings, which links back to Francis Bacon and Henry Tonks, who looks at the fragility of human beings. Henry Tonks paints the scars or the injuries of men in World War I, which is quite horrific. And the bones that symbolises death is actually taken from Polly Morgan and Damien Hirst in the way that they use bones in their works. I think Polly Morgan's works is one of them titled Atrial Flutter, with balloons with bones hanging down. The fact that it's the only jar that has a lid on it, it shows that we're actually trapped in this physical world. Everything, the meat, the bone, all the organs that make a human being up is actually preserved, maybe not in the same form, but it stays in the universe eternally, like energy. It just doesn't disappear. It's kept maybe in different form. Even if it's decomposed, it stays in the universe. And our lacking of understanding of the world beyond the physical world is almost scary. And the fact that what makes us up might just be bones and brains, organs, and after we die we just decompose and we just become a pile of rotten meat. That is truly horrifying, and that's why we cling to the belief that there must be something in the afterlife. We are indeed trapped because we have no understanding of the soul, scientifically speaking. That's why I used a 12-sided jar. Francis Bacon used a cage. The black jar, a brief description would be a jar painted in black inside. I initially spray painted it inside, but the reflective nature of the spray paint limited the effect that I wanted to bring out. So I actually used a special type of paint that deflects almost 99% of UV light, and when you look into the jar, it's darkness. I wanted to make that effect to show the idea of the void. We have absolutely no idea of what we were or what there was before we were born. It links to the plinth with the crow and the tree in it, because dead not end, it could be read dead end, so the dead end would be the void. When you look into it, there's nothing. It's like when you're asleep without dreaming, you're just in darkness, nothing. You're floating in that darkness that you can't comprehend what's happening. There's absolutely nothing. You don't know the space around you. It's just nothing. I thought maybe it was missing something because obviously the two other jars dominated this triptych, but the initial reason why I put it on the tallest plinth is because I wanted to keep it upright so people looking at the works wouldn't be able to look what's inside. But I thought, yes, it is a good way to sort of evoke a sense of enthusiasm or people wanting to know what's inside, but it's the different kind of feeling. That's why I made it on the side, so that people could actually look into it, and when they look into it, there's nothing. The paint allowed me to do it, which is fantastic, because it's flat and the human eye can't comprehend the three-dimensional nature of the interior of the jar. The void is something that I always thought was fascinating. It's also like one of Anish Kapoor's black holes on the floor, where you just can't see whether it's a hole or whether it's just a flat painting of black. Nicola Hicks, she uses plaster, straw, all kinds of cardboard or whatever she finds in her studio to make sculptures. And one of her sculpture was a crow head with a human body. It's really disturbing, and other than that, some of the works of Polly Morgan also inspired me to use clay to make this figure. It ties again to Damien Hirst 1,000 Years, how the cow head is just on the floor with flies around it.